Hey kids, it's Trailer Reader here with another 10-minute review for ya. Can you guess the book we're going to cover next? If you said William Golding's classic novel, Lord of the Flies, then you guessed correctly. Okay, let's play a game. Can you guess what the book is about simply by using the title? Game on. A Lord of the Flies, no less. Well then, this novel might be about my younger brother, 'cause I swear his room is a dirty toilet. He's not only the Lord of the Flies, he's a Lord of Fungus and unidentifiable odors. If that was your answer, then you are 100% not totally wrong. I mean, there is a younger boy in this. Well, several younger boys, actually. The novel follows a bunch of boys who are trying to escape World War III, and their plane gets shut down and crash lands on a tropical island. And then they have to rebuild civilization, and in this island paradise. Actually, does this sound intriguing? Maybe even a little bit better smelling than your younger brother's room? Perhaps you're right. So then, let's get into it. Okay, the basics of the novel first. This novel is written in 1954 by William Golding, and there are no girls in this book whatsoever. That's right, not a single girl makes an appearance in this book. Does that sound sexist to you? Do you think that maybe is a little unfair? Well, we'll ask that question again of you later as we get into the details of this book. The only people on this island are boys from the ages of 6 to 12. Now, this is a dystopian novel, which means that there's supposed to be a perfect society going on, but in fact, it's fatally flawed. The premise of the novel goes something like this. If given everything you need to survive, a perfect tropical paradise, and given a good education with understanding of morality and what's right and wrong, could a small group of boys create this place into a perfect society? Well, we'll answer that question a little bit later, but for now, let's get into the basics of the plot and themes. Okay, the beginning of the novel is sometimes a little bit confusing for people, so let's talk about that in a little greater detail. The novel starts off the night after two terrible things have happened. Number one, a plane filled with hundreds of British schoolboys fleeing World War III gets shot down by an enemy pilot, and their plane crash lands into a tropical island. The second terrible thing that happens is that the survivors of that crash, most of them all huddle together inside the wreck of the plane, and then a huge cyclone comes out and washes the whole wreckage back in the sea, killing most of the people and any adults who happen to have survived. Now, the opening pages follows the main character Ralph as he surveys the scar in the jungle caused by the wreck of the plane. Now, Ralph is handsome, smart, charismatic, a natural-born leader. He's soon joined by the second main character, a boy who is soon called Piggy, because he relates to Ralph the story of how he hated being called that back at school, and Ralph, in sort of a casual, mean-spirited boy-like gesture, likes the name and sort of calls him that, accidentally at first, but it sort of sticks. Poor guy. Now, Piggy is not like Ralph at all. He's overweight, he's highly intelligent, and he's a kind of a whiner. Imagine Leonard from The Big Bang Theory and you'll get what I'm talking about. Now, Ralph goes to the beach and discovers in the water a conch shell. And he doesn't know what it is, and Piggy has to explain it to him. It says, hey, this could be used for even like making a trumpet and like calling all the boys together. We can have an assembly. And Ralph's like, yeah. Okay. So he does this. Soon, all the boys of the island, the survivors, gather together at the beach because he continues to blow it, and people are like, whoa, this is awesome. We're meeting together. Something's being done. They decide to create a democracy. Now, there are, in fact, two main contenders for leadership because they're going to vote for leader. One is Ralph, and the second is a choir boy named Jack, who leads military-style his team of choir boys to the group, looking very, very impressive. Now, they vote for it, and Ralph wins the election because mostly he's handsome and charming, but also because he's the one that blew the conch. He's the one that seems to have the ideas, although it's actually Piggy's ideas. Now, Piggy is a contender, sort of, but no one really likes Piggy because he's not very likable. He's whiny. He's overweight. He's not attractive. I know. I feel you, Piggy. feel you. But despite being the one with the brains and the most clear foresight on what needs to happen, Ralph is the one who's elected leader. Now, they quickly decide that a couple of things need to happen. Number one, they need to build shelters. Number two, they need to create a signal fire and keep it going all the time in order that they could be rescued. And number three, they need to survey the island and find what they can do for food. And this they quickly do. Everyone's excited. Look, we created a democracy. We created a society. It's all functioning. Now, Ralph, as a concession to Jack, who's lost and not very happy about it, decides to make him the head leader of the hunting party who will go out and hunt for food. Jack is excited by this prospect, and at first they become friends. This does not remain so. Right off the bat, things begin to break down pretty quickly, and it's just small things at first, like stomping on some poor little kid's sandcastle or throwing sand in his eyes, and later a cruel kid named Roger begins pelting rocks at a 6-year-old and enjoys it. And he can get away with it because there's no one to tell him what to do. Have you ever tried to tell a 6-year-old what to do and just trust him to do it? He doesn't do it so well. I know some teenagers are the same way, by the way. But there's also kind of a nameless fear that comes upon the kids. They're afraid of something out there. Some poor kid has a nightmare about snakes, and they think there's a beast out there that's going to come get them. And the society they've created also begins to break down as kids lose interest in doing the right thing. It's boring maintaining shelters and gathering food and keeping a signal fire going up. They'd much rather go play in the water and splash around. Things really break down even further when Jack and his hunting party finally, successfully, after days of trying, kill a sow, a pig, a female pig, and they have meat for the first time. Jack uses this opportunity to gather people together to him who really enjoy the thrill of the hunt, the bloodlust, the like, yeah, this is something. Because remember, these kids are afraid. They want some sort of sense of control. And what better way is sense of control than going and inflicting your own will upon another person or animal? Now, in a gruesome scene of the killing of the sow, Jack decides to cut off the head of the sow and put it on a stick. Flies begin swarming all over it and covering it continually in a huge loud buzzing. And this is, in fact, the Lord of the Flies. In the meantime, Ralph and Piggy and Simon, another boy that's in the island, and a couple other twins, Sam and Eric, they're gathered at night going, what's going wrong? How come we can't keep these things together? Why is everything turning out so terribly? To throw out like a prayer out into the heavens saying, give us a sign, world of adults. What's going on? Adults do, in fact, give them a sign. One fighter pilot gets shot down. He parachutes out, but not before he's killed, and his dead body floats to the ground on the mountaintop of this island, and some voice sees it's like, the beastie, and suddenly they have physical evidence of a beast. By now, Jack has wrested complete control away from Ralph to himself, and the group that he joins him becomes a violent and somewhat cultish and scary mob that has moved away to the other side of the island called Castle Rock, which is not a really smart move. There's not a lot of water or food, but it is highly defensible. In the meantime, something interesting has happened on the other part of the island. Simon, who is a strange and somewhat prophetic type boy, looks at the Lord of the Flies, and he suddenly comes to realization. There is no beastie. The true evil, what's making everything go wrong, is ourselves. He discovers the dead pilot and realizes it's not a beast at all, it's just a dead man. And he wants to go and tell the rest of the kids on the island, but he has this premonition, this really strange vision that shows him if he goes down there, he is going to be killed. In the meantime, Jack has driven these boys into a huge frenzy, doing dancing around the fire, just violent imitations of killing pigs in order to drive off the beastie. And all of a sudden, here comes Simon in the dark, out of the jungle, and they say, it's the beast, it's the beast. And they take their spears, and they just jab him in a very bloodthirsty and just awful scene. Now, the next day, Ralph and Piggy are discussing the events, and Piggy can't believe this is happening, so he rationalizes, oh, well, it's Simon's fault. We thought he was a beast. He shouldn't have come out like that. And Ralph's just like, no, we did it. It was murder. That night, Jack and his team of hunters come and raid Ralph and Piggy and Sam and Eric's camp on the beach, and they steal Piggy's glasses. The next day, Ralph goes back and says, hey, we've got to be smart about this. We've got to be rescued. And then just then Jack returns and he says, Jack, give us back the glasses. And Jack's like, no. And they get in a huge fight. And while they're fighting, Roger levers this big, huge boulder down towards them. and it hits Piggy, smashes the conch shell, shatters it into a million pieces, and Piggy's launched off the cliff and down to the rocks of the ocean below, where his head splits open and his brain spills out and the waves wash him away. Can you imagine this? I mean, this is crazy, right? They're 6-year-olds, they're 12-year-olds. What? You know what I do with my 12-year-old? I spank his butt in his room and ground him. I don't expect, to be smashed with boulders or killing people with spears. Quickly, Ralph flees. He realizes his life is in danger, and rightly so, because Jack knows that Ralph is the only significant opposition to his leadership. So Jack gathers together his hunters, and they set fire to the jungle in order to flush out Ralph and to kill him and put his head on a pole right next to the Lord of the Flies. Ralph barely escapes to the beach. He's crawling in the sand, trying to get to the water, tears down his face as the hunting party begins to surround him. But all of a sudden, he sees a boot, and then a shoe, a leg, and it is a British naval officer who's looking down at him. Now, at first, the British officer thinks they're all playing a game, but when he realizes what's really happening, he looks at them with disgust. How can you, a bunch of British boys educated this way, turn out like this? And the boys begin to cry. They're rescued. But are they really? And that ends the book, Lord of the Flies. Heavy stuff, I know. So, how do you get through it? How do you analyze, and what are some things you need to be aware of? I'm combining my analysis and reading tips into one section once more to save time and give you some insight. Number 1, think of this book as a test case, a grand social experiment in order to answer the larger problems that are inherent within humanity. The author takes the test subjects, a group of boys aged 6 to 12, and puts them on a perfect tropical paradise and a good education, knowing the right from wrong, and see if they can create a perfect society. But why no girls, do you ask? Why? Isn't that sexist? Well, maybe. But the author has a pretty good point. I mean, girls, whatever the age, tend to complicate matters, and the most simple form of human being is a pre-adolescent boy. I mean, come on, let's face it, right? Sorry, boys. The second question is, can mankind save himself? And the answer to that is no. But you got to ask yourself, what are the adults doing during this time? They're having World War III. They're out murdering each other over the whole planet. And when the ship's captain arrives, what is he doing? Because his own mission is to hunt down and seek and kill enemy ships, just like Jack's job is to hunt down and kill Ralph. So the question then becomes for us, who's going to be the adult for the adults? The third thing you need to be aware of is this is a novel of symbols. One of the most important symbols is the conch shell, which represents democracy and civilization. A second good symbol are Piggy's glasses, which represent scientific or technological advances. And even the Lord of the Flies, the pig's head, represents the essential darkness within mankind. Even the sow, the female pig before it becomes the Lord of the Flies, is representative of women and maternal affection. When Jack and his hunters find the pig, she is actually feeding her piglets. And they startle and scare, and the piglets scatter, and they corner and capture the pig, and they violently kill it with their spears. They begin to shove their spears up the pig's butt with violent laughter and just a terrible, terrible display of humanity. Now, I don't think I need to tell you what that actually represents. So let me ask you now, do you still want girls on this island? Now, there are a couple of difficulties you'll face while reading this book. The first is it's easy to get lost in the passages. There's long passages in this book that are filled with vivid description, detail, and imagery, and punctuated by narrative comments about what's going on. But if you remember the main action sequences that happen just before that passage and just after, you ought to be able to find your place again and then be able to draw conclusions from it. The second thing that's difficult about reading this book is the dialogue. There are many long sections of dialogue where the speakers remain unidentified, which makes it like, okay, who's talking? I don't know. Actually, you don't have to worry about it because these boys are speaking from the heart of humanity itself. So it doesn't really matter who's saying what. Just take note of what is actually being said, because that's important, and then move on. But I do want you to be aware that there are 3 movie versions out there of this novel, and in my opinion, they pretty much all suck. There are lots of intertextual references, however, made in a lot of other areas that are really brilliantly done. And 2 places you'll find this referenced is The Simpsons and Family Guy. It's funny. So check those out, and you might be able to get better insight in how those intertextual references are used in other works that make you think more about, like, oh, okay, I get it. I read the book. This makes more sense to me now, what I've read previously in The Lord of the Flies. Well, that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed, or at least, survived this episode of your 10-minute literary review. And I hope it actually gave you some good insight and even added to your enjoyment of reading Lord of the Flies. Listed below are a bunch of links to other resources you can use to help you further understand this novel. And, as always, if you have a question specifically you'd like to ask me about this book, or have a recommendation for a future book you'd like me to cover in another episode, please listen in the comments section below. And as always, subscribe. And one last thought before I leave you. This book is one of my favorite books of all time to teach. Why? Not because it's depressing, although it really is depressing, but because it really lays out so clearly all the crap that we put over ourselves, over society, saying, oh, if we just educate ourselves, we'll be better human beings. But that doesn't really answer the question in the heart of human being. What makes him go wrong? What makes things go wrong? Human beings are flawed, and we need some sort of savior. And it's not going to be us. Don't say I didn't say education is important. It really is important. If we were more like Piggy, we'd have a lot less problems. But remember, it's good to be a little bit of Simon, too. Of course, you can feel free to disagree with me. In fact, in the spirit of debate, why don't you put down below what you think of my opinion on this novel? Should we be more like Simon and Piggy? Or should we be more like Ralph? Or is Jack really the answer? Or no, trailer reader. Mankind can save itself. All right. Well, let us know and let the debates begin. This is the trailer reader signing off. Hey, babe. You know the Lord of the Flies?
Uh-huh.
Do you think that if there were girls on the island instead of boys, the ending would be different?
Well, that will be very loving, but boring.
What do you mean?
Without boys involved, do you think there will be plot or conflict between girls?
I guess she has a point.